Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about the bumper of my Citroen DS. And I stripped the bumper down recently because there's some rust in other places which I'll cover later. But unfortunately when I took the bumper off, these coach bolt fixings broke. They sheared, both of them, there's one each end. And my project for today is to repair them. These are the repaired ones. The coach bolts themselves are M7, they're 7mm in diameter. So they're impossible to find. So the only alternative was to make some, and I made a couple, and I'm going to run through how I did that. This is a top view of one of the broken coach bolts fitted through the bumper trim. You can see it's got a blind head with no flats for a spanner. This is because the bolt's in an inaccessible spot for tools. A coach bolt is used that will lock into a square hole in the bumper while it's tightened. You can also see it's got a very short, stumpy piece of rusty thread. This is where the thread completely broke off when I unscrewed its fixing nut. This is the view from the underside. There's just a few turns of thread left and they're pretty mangled anyway, nothing much that is useful. At this point it's still stuck in the bumper, kind of impossible to get them out. The top of the bumper is cosmetic, so there's nothing to hammer against. You have to find some other way of getting them out. Quite often in this situation heat will help. One way to get a lot of heat into the bolts is to weld to the top of them. The heat from welding will make the bolt expand and can break the rust. That's what I did in this case, and you can see the welds on top of the heads. Luckily this did work for me on both bolts, and I was able to gently work the bolts until they released from the bumper trim. This is the square hole in the bumper where the coach bolts were fitted. The remainder of the two bolts is a mess, but coach bolts in M7 are unobtainable, so I had to come up with another solution. I decided there was a possibility I could save the heads and fit a new thread to them. For the first stage I marked up the centre of the head ready to drill. Then I drilled a small hole, a couple of mil, down through the top of the head and out through the bottom of the thread. And opened up that hole to 6mm, which is the pilot hole for a 7mm tap. With that hole drilled, I could use a 7mm tap to put a thread down through the head. You can see that here. Next stage is to clean off the remainder of the old thread with a grinder and screw the cleaned up head onto a 7mm bolt. I'm planning to keep the thread at the bottom of the photo, so I've set the length of this for the bolt length I need. Here I've tightened a nut against the old head. This is used to lock the head tight to the new thread so it can't turn as I work with it. Then I can grind off the part of the bolt I don't need. Now the bolt stub at the top needs cleaning up with a grinder. A short burst of weld holds the thread to the head initially, then the rest of the thread can be welded across to the head. Here's the new threads now welded permanently to the original heads. And this is how the new bolt will fit in the bumper, with the square shoulder pressed into the square hole and the new thread ready to be fixed to the main bumper below. These bolts will be every bit as good as the originals, and with the heads cleaned up they even look the same. So there it is, that's two new coach bolts made and fitted in my bumper. Now I've done that, I can move on and restore something else on the car, which I'm right in the middle of a lot of jobs on this now. If you like watching this kind of restoration, keep an eye on my channel. Ask Stuart.